Hey guys, welcome. We are just about a couple weeks away from the AP exam now, and so I've got a few videos that I'm making here for AP US government and politics, so that you guys can be prepared for each of the units. Okay, I know that we kind of we're hit and miss a little bit with some of the early review session. So I want to make sure everybody has access to all this information, that you guys can do the best that you can. We see lots of 3s, 4s, and 5s on this exam. So with that said, let's dive in. Unit 1, 1.1, Ideals of Democracy. So with the ideals of democracy, we're looking at things like natural rights. We're looking at limited government. We're looking at those ideals of what makes our democracy, what makes the United States, okay? And so we're looking at two foundational documents in particular here, the United States Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. Let's start with Declaration. Declaration, we've got a couple different things going on here. So we've got natural rights. Remember, natural rights are going to be those fundamental rights, those God-given rights that everybody has, okay? And so this is going to be in the Declaration of Independence. John Locke is going to be the influence for this. Remember, the natural rights are going to be life, liberty, property. And it's going to be adjusted into inalienable rights in the Declaration of Independence: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Okay? And so our next one then is going to be our social contract. The social contract, remember that I'm going to give up my right to murder somebody else, or I'm going to give up my right to steal from somebody else. Remember, in society where there's no government, there's no laws. And so I have the right to do whatever I choose to do. I'm going to give up some of those things in order to have protection from the government. So that the government is supposed to protect my life, my liberty, my property. That's a social contract. They're going to secure my rights. And I'm going to then follow the rules that the government sets up. Okay. Now, social contract under Hobbes says government can set up whatever rules it wants to. I got to follow them if I want protection. Okay. Now, Locke, which is what the Declaration is going to lean towards, Locke is going to say, hey, that social contract is a good thing, but it can be broken. And it should be broken by the people. This is that idea of popular sovereignty, that the people are the ultimate power holders here. People are the ones who hold all the power. And so in the Declaration, it says that the power is derived. So I'm trying to think of the exact quote. Deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed is what government. So government is going to get their power directly from the people. We're going to see that same concept of popular sovereignty pop up again in the Constitution. Then, as we kind of segue into our second document, the Constitution is going to we're going to see popular sovereignty in popular elections, especially with House of Representatives. Remember, House of Representatives is the first and is the only office that is directly elected by the people under our original Constitution before any of the amendments come along. Okay, so we are going to see popular sovereignty there. We also see the idea of republicanism. Republicanism is going to be we don't have a direct link to policy. We are going to select somebody to go to Washington, D.C., and they're going to vote on our behalf. They're going to make policy on our behalf. And so we're going to select somebody. We're going to elect people, the House of Representatives to the Senate. We're going to elect a president. Okay, the Electoral College is a part of this. And so republicanism, we are represented by somebody in Washington, D.C. Same concept in Springfield, or in our city councils or anything like that. And then the final concept that we care about here as we wrap up 1.1 is going to be limited government. Limited government is that idea that the government is not all powerful, that they are not absolute, that they cannot do whatever they want to do, okay? And so limited government is going to be, we see this in the Constitution, especially and here's where we're going to say it for the first of many times, Amendment 10, okay? Amendment 10 says that, hey, if we didn't give the power to Congress, to Supreme Court, if we didn't give it to the president, and we didn't forbid it from happening somewhere, then that power goes to the states and to the people. Okay, and so we're saying that this federal government is not all powerful, that we're setting up a government and we're giving them some powers, but we're not giving them all powers. And so that's going to be kind of the the end of 1.1. And so we're going to then go into 1.2, which is going to be our types of democracy. If you remember back to all the way to Unit 1, this was our argumentative essay. The three types of democracy. So participatory, pluralist, and elite democracies is what we're looking at here. So participatory democracy is going to be that idea that it emphasizes broad participation in government for individual citizens, an active role in civil society for each citizen. So think about we can go out and vote. We can go out and we can write a letter to Congress. We can go out and march. We can think about the Me Too movement. Think about the March for Our Lives movement. Think about Black Lives Matter. These things where people, individual people, are going to have a voice. And so that's participatory democracy. A pluralist democracy is then going to be this idea that our voice is stronger in a group. And so participatory, I'm going to actively participate. Pluralist is going to be plural, many people, so groups of people, okay? So this is group-based activism is kind of a good way to think of it here. And so what we are doing here is we're trying to make we're trying to influence political decision-making here. And people are going to be more powerful because they're in this group, okay? If I am one person saying, I think we should do this, nobody's listening to me. If I'm one of a million people saying, we think we should do this, people are going to start listening, okay? So that's what we're looking at here with a pluralist democracy. A pluralist democracy, we see this in interest groups especially. We talked about in class with the NRA, we talked about the NOW, we talked about all these different interest groups, especially as we're getting into Unit 5 here after break. And then we see political parties, other areas as well. And so our last one, our third type of democracy is elite democracy. Now remember, elite democracy, we've got some kind of filter between us and the government, that we don't have a direct line anymore, okay? And so government is skeptical that we can make educated or informed decisions. Remember back in the 1700s, the thought was, we're not going to be rich enough to have access to information. Even if we are, we're not going to be able to read it or write it. And so we're not going to have all the information in order to make decisions. Therefore, there should be a filter there. We should have input, but there's going to be a separation then that somebody else is going to make the final decision for us. And that's the idea of that electoral college, okay? And so if we're going to look back then at these things, the participatory democracy, we see that in our founding document of Brutus I. Brutus I, remember, Brutus is going to be our representative founding document for the anti-feds. Remember, anti-feds are against ratification of the new Constitution as it stands. And so Brutus I is going to say that people should have the power, that this new federal government or this new central government, it is going to take away civil liberties. It is going to take away that influence of us, the regular citizens, okay? Fed 10 is going to be our document for pluralist democracy. Fed 10 is going to say that groups or factions, remember, if you see factions, automatically Fed 10 is where your attention is going. But if we're looking at factions, remember, factions are bad. If we only have two groups, the larger group is always going to dominate the smaller group. But if we have a third group and a fourth group and a fifth group and a sixth group, then some groups can band together to protect that small group that was being persecuted, okay? And so factions are bad, but the only way to fight factions is to have more factions. Okay, so it's kind of fighting fire with fire, that idea, and so the idea here is that we'll have so many groups that nobody can dominate one other group. And then for an elite democracy, our document is going to be the U.S. Constitution. The U.S. Constitution is going to set up Congress so that we don't have a direct say in policymaking. We are selecting a representative who is then going to have the say in policymaking. We don't have a direct say in who the president's going to be. We select somebody, and then the Electoral College is going to select them. Okay, so we've got these filters between our our desires and what actually happens. And so 1.2 types of democracy. 1.3 then is going to be government power and individual rights. Remember that we're talking about at the beginning here with the Bill of Rights. We're talking about Bill of Rights were added because the Anti-Federalists feared that the new government are going to strip us of our civil rights, okay, or of our civil liberties. Remember that they're going to have a very Hobbesish view of once we turn over this power, we're never going to be able to get it back, that this popular sovereignty is going to suffer, and that we are going to lose our civil liberties to this new, big, huge federal government, okay? And the Federalists are going to say, hey, we like this new central government. It's needed, but it's not intended to strip away these liberties, okay? And the anti-Fed's argument to that is, hey, it's going to happen, whether or not you intend for it to happen or not. This is what the outcome is going to be, because power is going to get corrupted at some point down the line, okay? So we talked about Fed 10, that the reason that we need a new the reason that we need this big republic is to have more factions so that we can keep minority rights. And then Brutus I is going to counter that, saying, first off, this new tax power is going to be very dangerous. Then they also said that this new court having these lifetime terms is a scary thing. It's a lot of power for this new position. They feared this new power in the executive branch, and then of course they feared these civil liberties as well, which is why they fight so hard for this new Bill of Rights. Okay, so as we then go into 1.4, we can start to look at why this new Constitution. Why are we doing this? What's the point of this? If it's causing such strife within the nation, okay? Well, the reason is the Articles of Confederation were a colossal failure, okay? Now, there are good things that are going to come out of the Articles of Confederation, okay? There absolutely are. We are going to start to see a lot of good foreign policy things. We're going to be able to borrow money. We're going to be able to negotiate treaties. We're going to be able to do some things like that, and that's really going to kind of make us a legitimate power in the world's eyes. Okay, but within the country, domestically, the Articles were just a big failure. We did not remember Shays' Rebellion. We don't have to know the whole background. Remember, it's not a history class, but remember Shays' Rebellion. We have this uprising in New England that the federal government is basically helpless to help with. And so this band of farmers basically almost takes down the country and really shows us that we need to alter the Articles of Confederation. And so what we're going to see then is this new Constitution come about, okay? And so the challenges of the Articles of Confederation, there's no executive branch, there's no judicial branch, there's no power to tax, and there's no way to raise an army or anything like that because they don't have the money to do so. So there's lots of problems that are going to be going on. There's no way to regulate interstate commerce, so states are going to start fighting. Even though that we can coin money, every state can also coin money. So there's all this kind of everywhere. And remember, one of the biggest problems is, in order to change the Articles of Confederation, everybody's got to agree. And we talked about ordering a pizza. If you get 5 people together, nobody's ever going to agree, right? And so how are we going to get 13 states to agree to change this document? And so this is why the new Constitution is going to come about. And so that's going to come then, and we're in Philadelphia at the Constitutional Convention, and everybody's arguing because the big states want the House of Representatives to be based, or the Congress, to be based on population. The small states want it based on equality. Nobody can get along. Nothing's going to change. Everybody's packed their bags, they're ready to leave, and that's when Connecticut steps forward and says, I have an idea, sir. And Connecticut is the one who's going to kind of broker this deal, which is going to give us our bicameral legislature that we see today, where the House is going to come from that Virginia plan, and the Senate is going to come from that New Jersey plan. And so the one carrot then, because if you're a big state, you still are subject to this equality. So the carrot that kind of pushes them over to say, yes, we're going to take this on, and we're going to go ahead and agree to this, is going to be that power of taxation, that new power, that third rail of politics, that big, huge, that huge thing that's being added to this Constitution. They gave that power to the House of Representatives and by proxy to the big states. And so that's what's going to push this over the end for them. So we have our first compromise, and once we have that first compromise, then, I'm sorry, I'm kicking the camera, everything's all shaky, it's like an earthquake. And so once we have that first compromise, then we figure out, okay, here's how we're going to elect a president through the Electoral College, okay? And then they say, okay, here's how we're going to deal with the problem of counting population in the South. We're going to use that 3/5 compromise. Remember, we talked about that does not give more power or less power to slaves. Slaves still have zero power. And so it's all it's going to do is enhance the power of their masters. And then we get that final, compromise on the importation of slaves, and that slave trade could not be banned for 20 years following the ratification of the Constitution. The Congress could not stop the importation of slaves for 20 years. And so we take care of all of that, and then we also add in the amendment process. Remember, the amendment process, there's two ways to propose an amendment, two ways to ratify. Remember, we propose and then we ratify. Just remember the easy way. Remember that 2/3 of both houses of Congress, so 2/3 of the House and then 2/3 of the Senate, both have to say, yes, let's propose this amendment, and then 3/4 of the states' legislatures have to sign off on it. You remember those two ways, that's the proposal stage and the ratification stage, and you'll be golden for the AP exam. Okay, so then we get into the principles of American government, which is topic 1.6. Topic 1.6 is going to start talking about Fed 51. Fed 51 is going to say, hey, we've got the big quote in there is, if men were angels, no government would be necessary, right? But government obviously is necessary. Remember, these Federalist Papers are supposed to be encouraging people to ratify this new Constitution. That's what they're being written for. And so they're saying, hey, we understand that we've got a massive amount of new power. We understand why you'd be fearful of that, why you'd be a little bit trepidatious about this. And so in order to counter that, look what we did. Here's what we did, okay? So they're recognizing this new power. They're recognizing the fears of the anti-feds and saying, yes, but, okay? So we did do everything that the anti-feds are saying, but, right? And so they're going to say, hey, we separated the powers. We said, here's what the Congress can do, here's what the president can do, here's what the Supreme Court can do. We separate those powers. And then on top of that, we separated the Congress into two sections, okay? Because we wanted the Congress to be the most powerful branch. And so we separated that out so that nobody had all the power there either. And so we're really separating this power out, kind of diluting it by giving everybody a little bit of power, okay? And then on top of that, we are implementing these checks and balances. These checks and balances in order to stop other branches from being able to get too powerful within the legal system. So we've got the veto power and the overriding a veto, judicial review, all these different things that we see with checks and balances. Moving along, we're in 1.7 already, and I think that there's only 9 in Unit 1, so we are closing in on the end here. We've got a few different kinds of powers that we see when we look at the Constitution. We look at delegated powers, we look at concurrent powers, and then we look at reserved powers. So delegated over here, only for the federal government, reserved way over here, only for the states. In the middle then, concurrent powers, that's where they're going to be the ones that are shared, okay? So delegated powers over here, delegated, they are delegated, they're given, the power is given, they're delegated to the Congress, to the president, to the Supreme Court, okay? It is given to one of the three branches, okay? And so we think of commander-in-chief, we think of the coin money, whatever it is. It's written in the Constitution, here's your power. Reserved power, remember, we'll go back to that. We talked about it earlier. We're going to be talking about Amendment 10 a lot throughout these videos. Amendment 10, if it's not written in the Constitution, we didn't give it to Congress, we didn't give it to the president, then it goes to the states, okay? And so we're reserving those powers. Remember, the states are the ones building this Constitution. So they're the ones giving the power, delegating it. They're reserving some of it for themselves. They're keeping it back, okay? And so some of these things might be driving laws, marriage laws, education laws, healthcare laws, things along those lines. And then concurrent, the things that they can both do. The big, easiest one then is tax. We all know that we pay Illinois taxes and we also pay federal taxes. So that is 1.7. Oh my goodness, I just lost my note sheet. There it goes. I got it back. Okay. So we've got this separation of powers. We've got these different roles. We've got these different powers. Okay, so now we need to talk about the big thing here in Unit 1, one that's absolutely going to be on your test, is that concept of federalism, okay? Federalism is going to be the division of power between national, state, local, all the different governments, okay? How are we going to divide up this power, okay? So federalism, remember, is going to say, what's a federal power, what's a state power? Okay, we just talked a little bit about that, delegated powers, reserved powers, right? Okay, and so for many years, up until the Great Depression, really, we had what was called dual federalism. Remember in class we looked at those layered cakes, right? And so the top layer, here's what the federal government can do. Then that filling in between, here's the concurrent powers. And then we've got those reserved powers on the bottom. Here's what the states can do, right? And so for like 150 years or so, that's how our country was kind of built, and it made sense. And then we get to the Great Depression. FDR is going to implement what we call cooperative federalism. This was the marble cake. Remember, we take the batter of, let's call it vanilla cake, okay? And then we pour on top of it chocolate cake. We start to swirl it around. How do you separate it once it's been swirled around, right? That's the idea of that marble cake, that cooperative federalism. The idea here is the federal and the state governments can share responsibilities, and in doing so, they can share administration, they can share resources, they can share costs, okay? And what's going to wind up happening out of this is it's going to increase federal power. Okay, so the ways that the U.S. government is going to influence state governments is going to be, remember, the Constitution separates these things. The Constitution says, Illinois, you get to decide education laws. Federal government, you get to decide XYZ laws over here, right? They don't intermingle them. Well, the federal government says, hey, Illinois, you want some money? And all goes, yeah, we want some money because we don't have any, right? And so national government says, here's what you can do. If you want some money for your education, you do this. And now the federal government's getting Illinois to do things, okay? They're getting Illinois to change their laws to do what the federal government wants in exchange for cash money, right? Okay, and so we've got a couple of things that we're going to look at here. The first one is categorical grants. This is what the federal government wants, okay? A categorical grant is money that's coming from the federal government to the state governments, but the federal government is the one who is making the decisions, how that money is going to be spent, okay? Down here, the state governments, they don't have a say. So Illinois, here's money for textbooks. And that's great, but we don't need textbooks. We need substitute teachers. Well, then we're going to give the money to somebody else. You can use it on textbooks, or we'll give them the money somewhere. Oh, we'll take it. We'll buy new textbooks, okay? So the state government doesn't have a say. A block grant is going to be a little bit different than that, where a block grant, the state government is going to be up here a little bit more, and the federal government is going to be down here. the federal government's going to say, hey, state of Illinois, here's some money for education. And they're going to say, what do we have to spend it on? They said, education. They said, okay, well, we can spend it on substitute teachers. But Texas is like, well, we'll spend it on textbooks. And Idaho might say, well, we're going to spend it on building some new infrastructure or some new actual schools. So everybody the states are going to have more of a decision in a block grant. Okay, so the way I always look at a block grant is I picture a block of money with like a ribbon around it. Here you go. Just make sure you spend it on this broad kind of policy rather than a very narrow policy, which would be categorical grants. Okay, and then the final thing that I have here in my notes is revenue sharing. Remember, revenue sharing is going to be taking money from states who have a lot of money, given states don't have a lot of money. And this is going to be basically unrestricted. They can spend it on what they need to. And remember, that stopped in the 1980s. Our two court cases then for 1.8 are going to be McCulloch versus Maryland and U.S. versus Lopez. McCulloch versus Maryland, the facts here, remember, Congress established a bank in Maryland. This is a national bank, and in Maryland they try to just tax the heck out of it. Remember, Maryland already has a state bank, and they feel like this is going to be a competition for them. And so within the state of Maryland, they said, sure, you can have this national bank here, but we're going to just tax the bejesus out of it, okay? Well, we wind up going to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court holds two things. First off, they say Congress has the ability to open a national bank. If we look at the necessary and proper clause, which is going to be at the end of section 1.8 of the Constitution, they said, hey, Congress is going to be borrowing money. Congress is going to be taxing. They need a place to hold this money. We don't expect congressmen to have it under their mattresses, right? So it makes sense. It's necessary and proper for them to open a bank. So they have the right to open a bank. And you cannot tax up. Taxes go down, okay? You don't see me, Mr. C, saying, I'm taxing everybody in Spring Valley. I'm going to tax the Spring Valley government. No, Spring Valley government taxes me, right? Taxes go downhill. And they said that the supremacy clause is going to rule that the Constitution and then the federal government are above Maryland, right? And so Maryland can't tax up, and it would go down. And so we're looking at the supremacy clause, and we're looking at the necessary and proper clause. And what's going to happen with our balance of power here with federalism, the federal government's going to be up here, the state government's going to be down here. Remember, that's going to always be shifting, and we don't have to look far. We just have to look to U.S. versus Lopez to see why. U.S. versus Lopez, remember, we've got a student in the great state of Texas who is accused of bringing a gun to school, okay? And he brings this gun to school in violation of the Gun-Free School Zones Act. I think that's the right order of the words. It might turn a couple of those around. But basically, he brings a gun to school even though it's against the law. Texas is going to charge him under state law, but the federal government says, no, we want to charge them because Congress has just passed this new law. We want to make an example of this. And so make sure the kids are not bringing guns to school, which is a good idea, but it's turns out the holding says the federal law is unconstitutional. This law that Congress wrote was unconstitutional because possession of a gun in a school zone does not impact interstate commerce. He brought the gun from school. He didn't bring it from Arizona. He brought it from home. And so therefore, there's no interstate commerce going on here, which is what Congress used as their power for passing this law. And so we revert to the 10th Amendment then. Congress can't just make any law. They have to stay within their lane of what's listed there in Section 1.8. And so the Supreme Court says, no, this is Texas has the right to make this law. Congress, you do not. And so what's going to happen here, the states are going to get more power and the federal government's not. So remember, we're always kind of on that teeter-totter, that seesaw, that whatever we're calling it, that balance of power is going to shift back and forth between states and the federal government. Remember, it often depends on the balance of power within the Supreme Court, where that's going to lead, right? If we have a conservative versus a liberal court, it could go back and forth, okay? And so with all of that, 1.9 is federalism in action, and what I have written down here is laboratories of democracy. And so one of the things that can happen here with a positive of federalism is we can try things at a state level and see if they'll work at the federal level. And one of the big things that we talked about in class was Romney Care. Romney Care was health care for the state of Massachusetts. Mitt Romney was the governor within the state of Massachusetts, worked very well within Massachusetts, and becomes the blueprint for Obamacare, which he rolls out to the nation a few years later as he is the president. Okay, so we tried it on a small level, worked, and so we tried it on a larger level. Another example would be the state of Colorado legalizing marijuana. They did not see the huge highway deaths and the huge unemployment that everybody expected them to see. So we've seen other states, Illinois included, starting to legalize marijuana as a revenue stream because they did not see this huge impact on their society that they thought that they would. And so these are some laboratories of democracy, I believe we're calling them. And so those are just some small things there. That's Unit 1. I hope that you were able to, you can pause and you can go back and you can do all kinds of things like that. If you have questions over anything, always come in and talk to me or email me or whatever. We can take care of any of that kind of stuff. But my friends, I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day. Be well, do something for other people today, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.